Before we ever talk about applying gel, we have to talk about removal. And I want to say this very clearly right up front. Most nail damage doesn't happen because gel is bad. It happens during removal. That's one of the biggest misconceptions in nail care, especially at home. Gel products really truly aren't inherently damaging. The damage usually comes from how that product is taken off, how aggressively it's removed, and how often nails are being prepped, stripped, and reworked without enough recovery time in between. And because of the timing of this series, this is actually the perfect opportunity to reset. Now, if you currently have product on your nails that you're no longer interested in, maybe you're unsure about, or even concerned about from an allergy or sensitivity standpoint, removing it now and removing it correctly gives your nails time to rest and recover. By the time we get into the application tutorials I have planned later in the series, your nails will have had time to grow, strengthen, and recalibrate. And honestly, that recovery window matters. Healthy nails aren't built during application or because we apply products. They're actually built during the pauses in between and being smart about how we maintain our nail health. Now, one quick safety note I wanted to mention before we go any further, I need to say something very important. If you have an open wound on or around your nail, meaning a break that goes down into the nail bed, exposed skin, bleeding, or large cuts on your fingers, removal is not recommended. This is because acetone, filing, and pressure should never be used on an open wound. In these situations, your best option is to clip that nail as short as possible without causing a lot of pain, clean the area, and then I want you to apply a protective dressing like a Band-Aid. The important part is to let that skin heal first before attempting any product removal. And this includes nails that are broken deeply into the nail bed or fingers with significant cuts or irritation. Healing always comes first before attempting product removal. And if you have anything severe going on, I always recommend seeing a medical doctor to take care of that. Now, before we touch the nails themselves, let's talk about your setup, because a good removal starts with protecting everything involved, not just the nail plate. First, I recommend removing all jewelry like rings, bracelets, watches, literally everything from the wrist down, because acetone can damage jewelry and rings and bracelets can also trap acetone. So it can trap acetone against the skin, which can cause irritation and dryness, especially if you forget to wash off. And if you're only removing one hand of fingers, I like to protect my other nails with a glove. Nitrile or latex are great. I also like to be mindful of what I'm wearing, as you'd be surprised how mishaps or a clumsy move can ruin your favorite shirt or pants. So I will also often place an old towel in my lap so that I always have something to wipe my hands on if needed. All right, next we're gonna protect our surfaces because acetone can damage furniture finishes, countertops, plastics, carpet, and many household materials. So I'm gonna be using our Attain silicone workspace mat. It is wonderful for at-home manicures, and that's exactly why we created it, because it protects surfaces and it also has this raised lip that prevents spills from escaping your work area. So it has a raised lip all the way around the edges, and it's also amazing because it is reusable and easily washable. So if you ever get any gel residue or anything on your mat, all you need to do is use either rubbing alcohol, gel cleanser, or acetone to clean it off. And you can also throw this bad boy in your washing machine, or you can hand wash with soap and water, depending on your preference. If you don't have our silicone mat yet, then you can also use another towel. And then I also recommend putting a paper plate or a nice big piece of aluminum foil, roll up the edges on the aluminum foil to kind of create a similar type of ridge that is going to keep everything sequestered. That way you're not ruining a table or a countertop while you work. And I also wanted to quickly talk about acetone. All right, so let's talk quickly about acetone versus nail polish remover, because nail polish remover is not the same thing as acetone. Here's a quick comparison on 3 different nail polish removers I found at my local grocery store. And oftentimes you can find nail polish remover at your local drugstore or beauty supply, but it's important to note the differences between them. This one is actual acetone. The rest are watered down and have some other ingredients in them like oils or perfumes, and they're not powerful enough to remove most artificial nail products efficiently. Okay, so if we look at the actual ingredients on this product, you'll notice the first ingredient is acetone, which is exactly what we want. And it also has denatonium benzoate, which is usually an ingredient that gets added to these types of chemicals to create a very, very bitter taste, which helps to prevent kids from consuming chemicals like this. Now, if we look at the back of the other two, so we have non-acetone nail polish remover and we have nail polish remover. And the interesting thing is this also says it's for artificial, gel, and natural nails. This one says it's for natural nails. And this one says it's just maximum strength. So this is where things can get a little bit confusing. And that's why I wanted to go over it with you in detail. So you'll notice the one over here that is nail polish remover. The first ingredient is acetone, but the second ingredient is water, and then there's a whole bunch of other ingredients in here, including fragrance, some preservatives, and that same denatonium benzoate, as well as some color. So this is not something that you want to use for soaking off artificial nails of any kind, including gel polish. This other one, the non-acetone nail polish remover, has a slightly different solvent in it. This is methyl acetate, but the second ingredient is coconut oil. It also has fragrance, and then it has that denatonium benzoate in it. So again, I don't recommend this for product removal. You're going to want something that actually just says acetone, and this is going to be your best bet for product removal. You'll also want to have all your tools laid out before you start. Today, I'll be using our Attain emery file, which has the perfect 80-100 grit for product removal. I'm also going to be using the Attain cuticle pusher, which has both a spoon and a blade head, which is also great for removal as well as manicuring. And I'm also going to keep our buffer handy, as well as our removal wraps, which already come with pads on them. You can buy any of these items individually, or you get them in a lot of our Attain kits. If you don't own any of this equipment already, at a bare minimum, you're going to need something similar. So you could use something like cotton balls. You can even cut them in half so they're not as big. You can also use cotton rounds cut up into nail-shaped sizes or pads about this size. You're going to need a cuticle pusher of some kind, and you're also going to need a 100 grit nail file. The coarser, the better when it comes to product removal. So everything should be within reach, as we want to feel prepared and organized. We don't want to feel stressed or be knocking stuff over as we work. So keeping everything close to you and within reach is going to make things feel a lot more streamlined. And then last but not least, I want you to think about ventilation and dust and where you are in your house, because removal can be a bit messy and we're going to be working with acetone. So you want to choose a work area that won't get damaged by a bit of dust, and also an area where you have plenty of room for air circulation. If this video is already helping you, be sure to like and subscribe, because this video is part of a larger series called How to Do Gel Nails at Home. You can start from the beginning at any time, and I recommend watching this series in order if you want the full foundation. And throughout the series, I'll occasionally drop some small knowledge check-ins and rewards for those of you that are truly paying attention. So keep watching. Okay, and before acetone ever touches our nails, I want to talk first about protecting the skin. Acetone doesn't just break down product, it also strips lipids from the skin barrier. So that's why dryness and cracking and irritation is so common when you're constantly removing things like gel polish or soak off products. So before you wrap anything, I want you to think about applying generous amounts of cuticle oil around the nail. You can get this all over your finger. And this also doesn't interfere with removal. It doesn't slow anything down. So really generously apply this, and you can even smooth it all over your skin just to make sure that this hand is not going to get dried out, even if we have a little bit of acetone run down our fingers, okay? Okay, so this video covers how to remove all the types of nail products I could think of, which will be broken down individually. But there are some universal rules when it comes to removal. The first rule that applies to every soak-off system you'll ever work with, regardless of brand or product type, is this: you want to file more, soak less. The goal is to let mechanical removal do as much of the work as possible so acetone doesn't have to. If you leave most of the product intact, acetone can't penetrate effectively. Instead, we want to reduce the bulk of the nail through filing, and I'll show you exactly how to do this for your specific product type. Now, the second universal rule of removal is to know that when acetone penetrates the nail plate, it temporarily dehydrates it. It can also cause a physical distortion in the product if you haven't removed enough product through filing. So the nail plate and product can actually contract and can create a pinching and pressure on the nail bed. This sensation is more noticeable when there's still a lot of product on the nail and when also too much heat is involved or when your nail plate is already thin or compromised. So I wanted to let you know that throughout this process, if your nails start to throb, burn, or feel painful, that is a signal that I want you to stop. That usually means there's too much heat, too much product left on the nail, or the product you're trying to soak off is not actually a soak off product. If you're feeling pain during any of these removal techniques or seeing no signs of breakdown, that's a strong indication that the product needs to be filed off, not soaked off. And also that you should stop, take a break, and reattempt through gentle filing alone. And don't worry, I will show you how to do this step by step. So if you would like to skip ahead, use the timestamps I've listed here on screen or in the video description to jump directly to the section that matches your product. And this part is important. Once you finish your product-specific removal section, I want you to skip ahead again to the final section of this video. The ending covers recovery, nail softness, and what to do next before we move into application later in the series. So even if you skip around a little bit, make sure you come back for the final portion of this video. Okay, so let's walk through how to safely remove a traditional 3-step gel polish manicure, meaning you have just base coat, color, and top coat on your nail. This type of gel service is usually extremely thin, and it's way thinner than things like builder gels, overlays, or extensions. As you can see, I've got all different types of nail product on my nails. So because of that, we need to be especially cautious during filing. And when gel polish is thin, it's much easier to accidentally file into the natural nail plate if you're rushing or you're applying too much pressure. So the goal of filing here is not to remove all the gel. The goal is to break through the top coat and expose the layers underneath so acetone can do the rest of the work. So I'm going to take my Attain emery file. I'm going to use the 80 grit side, which is the more textured, gritty side. For those of you curious, grit refers to the amount of particles per square inch. So the less particles means it's going to feel more scratchy. The more particles per square inch, it's going to feel smoother. So 80 to 100 grit is great for product removal or filing very, very tough products like acrylic and hard gel. So you're going to start by paying attention to where you're filing. I always like to show people this angle because if we just go in with our nail file, it's very easy to start filing on our skin. So really pay attention to where you're putting that nail file down on your fingernail. And what we want to do is start by lightly filing the surface of the nail using controlled pressure, okay? You can hold your file in one of two ways. You can hold it kind of like a butter knife, except you're going to put your finger on top of the flat part. Or you can also hold it like underhanded, like you're going to throw a frisbee to somebody. And depending on your preference, you can turn your hand around like this, or you can keep it facing you. I find that it's actually easier to avoid my skin if I keep my skin up above my nail. You also want to utilize the full length of your nail file when filing. So instead of just making little itty bitty movements back and forth, if you actually hold the end of your file, you can use the full length of your file to get one nice stroke. So my goal here is to remove a bit of top coat and color in different spots throughout the nail. So once I start to see a little bit of clear poke through, I'll move my nail file to a different spot. And you can keep gently filing in the same area until you start to see that clear base coat start to peek through, okay? Be sure to cover as much of the nail as possible with these little holes and do everything nice and gradually, okay? So if I dust off, you can see I've got 3 little etched areas here. Don't forget to do the free edge of your nail, which is this area down here, the tip of your nail, as that's usually where gel polish is a little bit more stubborn when we're trying to remove it. Usually up by the cuticle will come off pretty easily, but you can also give it a nice little gentle scratch while being mindful of your skin. So a helpful visual cue for this part is that the nail should kind of look like Swiss cheese, where you have these little holes throughout the surface, and you want to make sure that you break through that top coat and that color. That tells you that the acetone is going to be able to penetrate down to those bottom layers effectively. So once your nail looks like this, you're ready to bring in the acetone. To apply a nail wrap, you're just going to wet it with a little bit of acetone. So I like to put the pad on the top of the bottle or on top of the pump if you have a pump at home. You want to moisten this pad completely so that there's no more dry spots on it, but you also don't want it to be like completely soaking wet. And then what we're going to do is we're going to line up the tip of our fingernail with the edge of the pad. So instead of putting your finger down here, you actually want to make sure that the tip of your fingernail is touching the wet pad. Then you're going to fold this up and it should cover your entire nail plate. Okay. So if it's not covering it, make sure that that cotton or the nail wraps that you're using cover the entire nail plate. Then, if we're looking at it from the top, I've got my finger kind of sandwiched in there like a little taco. I'm just going to fold one side under and then like this, and then I'm going to fold the other side over that. Okay, so we end up with a little finger burrito, and I like to give my nails just a little gentle squeeze to really secure that around my finger. You don't need these to be super tight, but you do want them to be nice and secure without a bunch of gaps because acetone evaporates very quickly, and we want to prevent that evaporation so that the acetone can work on the product and not dry up. Repeat this process for however many gel polish nails you're going to be removing. If you're removing all 10 fingers of gel polish, I recommend actually doing them from pinky to pointer and then thumbs at the end. And one helpful trick, if you're struggling with getting a whole hand of wrapped nails without being able to use your thumbs, is you can actually make the wrap onto the finger, line them up carefully afterwards because you can always take them off. And then when you're ready, you can put it back on and just give it a nice little squeeze. So oftentimes if I need to do something where I need dexterity, I'll simply just take off my thumb wrap or my pointer finger wraps, and then I will keep them organized in reference of size. And that way I can easily just slide it back on when I'm done, and I'll sit there with all 10 fingers being soaked at the same time. Wait time is going to vary, but for gel polish, I want you to allow at least 7 minutes before doing your first check. This initial 7-minute check is important because it allows you to see how the product is responding without over soaking or forcing removal. So let's wait 7 minutes. And as soon as you're done applying all of your nail wraps, make sure you put the cap back on your acetone to also prevent evaporation, and also make sure that you don't accidentally spill it while you're working. While we wait for 7 minutes of soak off time, I wanted to provide a quick tip. Some people find it helpful to wrap their hands in a plastic bag. You can use something as simple as a grocery bag or a Ziploc or anything like that. And what I like to do is put my hand inside of the bag. I'll gently wrap it around my wrist, and then you can tuck it in. This is going to help keep the acetone from evaporating prematurely. It'll keep the warmth of your hand inside the bag, which also helps speed up the time. But during colder months, like during the winter, you can also apply a heating pad on top of your hands, a warm towel, or even something as simple as just sitting on your hands to speed up the removal time through body heat. A lot of people ask me why 7 minutes is my checkpoint, and that just comes from years of experience of using different gel systems. It tends to be the right number for that first initial check. Okay, so 7 minutes are up. I'm going to take off the bag and just set it aside because I'll probably need it again. And let's check this. After 7 minutes, I want you to gently unwrap one nail. A lot of times you can just, like I said, pull this straight off. And we're going to check how the product is responding to that acetone. So this is definitely a soak-off product because it's flaking, it's peeling, and just after 7 minutes, it's already starting to come off. If you're experiencing no movement whatsoever after 7 minutes, especially if you're starting to see severe nail plate pinching or discomfort, skip to my hard gel portion where I'll teach you how to remove those type of materials. You'll notice that even after you take the wrap off, sometimes the layers of product will start to pop and peel on their own. And what we're going to do is we're going to take our cuticle pusher and we're going to gently push the material to try and get some of it to come off, just to remove those areas that want to come off. So very, very gentle pressure. I'm using a parallel angle, so I'm not digging into my nail like this. I want to keep my cuticle pusher nice and flat to the nail, and with no pressure at all, I just kind of go back and forth right on the surface to see if anything wants to come off, okay? You can also use the other end on the free edge just to kind of flick a little bit and see if any of that product wants to come off too. For any areas that are still firmly attached that don't come off with just even a little bit of scraping like this, I don't want you to force any product that's resisting, because that is exactly how damage starts to happen. If we tug on this product, it will pull layers of our nail plate off. So we want to be very gentle about how we go about removing even something as simple as gel polish. So for these stubborn areas, I want you to go back in with the emery file, the 80 grit side, which is the textured, super gritty side, or a similar nail file that you have. And we're just going to gently refile only this portion of the gel polish that's still on the nail, okay? And you'll notice that coincidentally enough, these are the areas that I didn't etch very much with my nail file, because you can still see the shiny top coat. So this is a great thing to know, that if you're not etching the full surface of the nail, this is usually what will happen, is that this will be the more stubborn area that just doesn't want to come off. So more filing up front means less soak off time. So with this, I want you to be very careful, again, watching where you're filing. Don't just file from the top without really looking at it up close, because we only want to file on the product. We don't want to file all over our natural nail or our skin, okay? So really look at where you're touching down with your nail file. And if you want to keep it in contact with that one particular area and just saw back and forth, you can also do that. You'll notice I'm holding my nail file just a little bit differently this time, because I'm only really focused on this one area. So now I'm kind of holding it more like a butter knife, where I'm using my finger to give me a little bit more stability. I'm not using the full length. Okay, so just like that, poking through some of that. And then on this other side, I'll go down this direction just to etch through some of that as well. Okay, so for those stubborn areas, file again, and then you can easily take your wrap and put it right back on. If you need to re-moisten the wrap because it feels dry on the inside, you can completely carefully unwrap this one more time. Take off any of the little flakes that are inside of the wrap, re-moisten it, and then reapply it just like we did in the beginning. So as long as you're careful about how you remove your foil wraps, you can absolutely reuse them. And honestly, sometimes what I'll do, if I'm going to remove both hands eventually, I'll remove one hand so that I have at least one hand I can work with. I'll save these wraps because they're the exact same size as my other fingers. And I'll literally just re-moisten my thumb wrap when I go to do my other thumb and put this one on the other hand when I go to remove it. So you can actually get away with using only 5 wraps for 10 fingers if you're a little bit more cautious about what you do with your nail wraps while you're using them. So let's continue to soak this a little bit more. And real quick, while we're waiting, I'm going to explain that total soak off time for traditional gel polish is typically somewhere between 15 and 20 minutes. But also these times can vary dramatically. It can vary based on the thickness of the product, the formula of the gel, whether any primers or like adhesion promoters were used, temperature of your hands, how much lifting or wear the manicure had before removal. And the stronger the adhesion to the nail plate usually means removal is going to take a little bit longer, and that's totally normal. So the key is patience, gentle filing, controlled soaking, and light pressure during removal, because we want to protect that natural nail plate and prevent unnecessary damage. Now you can see with just a couple more minutes of that acetone exposure time after I filed my finger a little bit more, you can even see that the gel polish is literally just flaking off. And this is what we want. So it really pays to be nice and gentle with your nails, because you're not going to be removing portions of your nail plate. And this is going to help prevent you from needing to take breaks from gels or any type of artificial nail product. Your nails are going to stay healthy no matter if you're removing color every 2 to 3 weeks or not. Okay, so I'm just flaking off a little bit more with the blade of my cuticle pusher here. And At the end, you can very lightly file off any really stubborn areas. Usually the free edge of the nail is the most difficult because sometimes our natural nails are a little bit more flimsy at the free edge. So getting this type of leverage with the blade or the spoon head of our cuticle pusher can be a little bit annoying. So that's usually when I will use the other side of my removal file. So this side, the really gritty side, is the 80 side, and the 100 side is also a little bit smoother. So I can very gently just go over these little areas with the 100 grit side just to remove them. I'm using no pressure, just very, very lightly going over the surface of that product and just flaking off any of the areas I see that are red. It's actually totally normal for your nail to look this dry, and that's why I recommend putting on that cuticle oil before you put on removal wraps. You'll see that my skin actually looks a lot nicer than it would have if I didn't do that, and this chalky whiteness will actually go away when we reintroduce moisture. Now, if you're going to be reapplying product, you would leave this alone, which we'll talk about later in our application tutorials. But since I'm recommending that you guys take this video as an opportunity to let your nails rest and recuperate, I'm going to show you a couple quick things you can do to kind of finish out this removal process, make your nails look nice again, and that way you can enjoy something that looks well manicured. All right, once you've finished removing this product, you can skip ahead to the final section of this video where I'll explain what your nails should feel like after removal, how to let them recover this week, and what we're doing next in the series. I've listed the timestamp here, or you can click the clickable timestamp down in the video description. In this section, I'm going to show you how to remove any type of built-up soak-off extension. This includes things like builder in a bottle, acrylic, polygel, soak-off builder gels, and full coverage tip extensions like Gel X. Because these types of applications are going to be much thicker than a traditional gel polish, we need to do even more filing before we think about soaking off the product. If you have a lot of length, I recommend only clipping your nails down to leave about 5 to 10 millimeters, which is about this amount of length. Because if we clip too close, we can do a couple things. We can actually cut our hyponychium, which is the skin that grows out underneath our nail plate, and we can also put unnecessary pressure on our nail bed itself, okay? So you're gonna clip everything down to this length, and then the rest of the way we're going to file. So I'm going to use the same Attain emery file 80-100 grit that I used for my gel polish removal previously in this same video. The more textured side is going to be the 80 grit side, and you're going to want about an 80 grit nail file for this type of product removal. You can also use an e-file if you're experienced with e-filing, but an 80 grit nail file is going to do the trick. Grit refers to the amount of particles per square inch. So when you see 80 or 100 or 180 grit listed, that tells you the smoothness or the grittiness of that particular abrasive. When we're talking about less particles per square inch, it's going to feel a lot more textured. And you can see the 80 grit side is very, very textured. Whereas once we go up in number, we have more particles per square inch, which means that it's going to be feeling a little bit smoother and finer. Nail files typically can go all the way up to about 400 or 600, but the typical ones you're going to use for things like artificial nails or gel polish are going to be somewhere between 80 and 180 grit. So this particular extension is Soak Off Builder Gel, which is our Attain adhesion product. My whole nail is built out with Attain adhesion. So this is our base builder in one, and I don't have any plastic tips underneath this nail, but there is definitely an apex and some thickness here compared to my gel polish nail. So I'm going to file through this significantly, and I'm also going to try and get the length down so that the acetone can penetrate the free edge of my natural nail. So I'm going to take the 80 grit side, and I'm going to use the full length of my nail file. So to make filing more efficient, you can hold your nail file in a couple of different ways. Typically, you'll see me either hold a nail file like a butter knife where I have my finger on top, except instead of like a knife's edge, we're going to put our finger here, and that gives us some control to make sure that we are able to put a little bit of pressure on the nail file itself. The other way I usually hold my nail file is I'll hold it underhand, almost like I'm about to throw a frisbee to someone. This is going to allow you to do a lot more efficient filing than holding it way down here and just shimming back and forth. We can actually use the full power of our nail file by holding it on the end underhanded and use the full length of the nail file to go across the nail. So this, I'm just going to use one direction filing to thin this out. And once you get comfortable with where you're filing, you can even go back and forth and get 2 times the amount of filing per movement. So the goal here is to remove most of the color. This is also going to help me identify any lifting or any cracks that I might have in the nail. And I really want to remove most of the bulk of this product. Every so often you can stop and check, because we also want to make sure that we're not filing into our natural nail plate. So take a look from all angles just to see how thin the application is, and also be mindful of where you're making contact with your nail file. So I want to make sure that I'm not filing up onto my skin. So think about where the nail file is hitting on your nail as you're making those strokes. And so really what we want to do is have the whole length of the nail file go across that one part, that one surface that we're working on. And then we can adjust the angle of the file to make it hit different areas of the nail. So if I just put a little bit of alcohol in here to wet this, now you can see where my natural length is. So it doesn't look like I have any infections or any cracks or any lifting in this nail, which is great. And so now I can see where my natural nail is. So I can actually shorten this length down. I'm going to kind of pull back my skin and support this nail by putting my thumb on the side. And I'm just going to file down to about where that natural length is. Okay. Then I can go and remove a lot more of the bulk. Okay, so let me take a break here and I'll show you guys what this looks like. So you can see I've been able to get the thickness way down. I've been able to shorten the length back to where my natural nail is. And this is about how much product removal I would do before I put wraps on. Since this is a soak-off product, the acetone is definitely going to help break down all of this material. And you'll see after we do our first initial soak-off check how much product comes off after that first initial 7 minutes. So now I'm ready to put a wrap on. So I'm going to take my acetone. I'm going to put the pad on the opening of the acetone and just give it a couple dunks here to really moisten that pad. Okay. We don't want the pad to be soaking wet where it's dripping off of the foil, but we do want to make sure it's wet enough so that the acetone does not prematurely evaporate and cause, kind of a dry pad halfway through our soak off. So this is why having a protective mat on your table or a protective work area is really important to prevent damage to your surfaces like furniture. Okay, so to apply my nail wrap, I'm going to make sure that I put the tip of my fingernail, the free edge is what it's called, the free edge of my fingernail, and I'm going to make sure that is touching the wet pad. If I put my finger down here, I'm not going to get any acetone exposure on the end of my finger, so I like to always put the tip of my finger right here. You can even put it a little bit further up if you want to, and then I'm going to sandwich my finger in between this little taco that I'm creating with my nail wrap. So my nail is centered right underneath that cotton pad. If you're using cotton balls and aluminum foil, same idea. You can cut any type of cotton ball or any type of cotton wipe, place it wet on your nail plate, and then you're going to cut out a similar size piece of aluminum foil. You're going to fold the foil in half to create this little taco first. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of pinch, and then I'm going to wrap one side under. So like this. Wrapping one side under and then the other side right over that and around, okay? So we're making a nice little burrito, and then I like to give it a nice gentle squeeze so that it's secure on my finger and there's no giant gaps around my finger. The goal with acetone is to try and prevent premature evaporation and also to help keep a little bit of heat in here. And as soon as you're done applying all of your nail wraps, make sure you put the cap back on your acetone to also prevent evaporation, and also make sure that you don't accidentally spill it while you're working. While we wait for 7 minutes of soak-off time, I wanted to provide a quick tip. Some people find it helpful to wrap their hands in a plastic bag. You can use something as simple as a grocery bag or a Ziploc or anything like that. And what I like to do is put my hand inside of the bag. I'll gently wrap it around my wrist, and then you can tuck it in. This is going to help keep the acetone from evaporating prematurely. it'll keep the warmth of your hand inside the bag, which also helps speed up the time. But during colder months, like during the winter, you can also apply a heating pad on top of your hands, a warm towel, or even something as simple as just sitting on your hands to speed up the removal time through body heat. A lot of people ask me why 7 minutes is my checkpoint, and that just comes from years of experience of using different gel systems. It tends to be the right number for that first initial check. Okay, 7 minutes are up. Let's take off the plastic and let's do our initial check. Okay, so I'm just gonna gently pull this off. I like to be careful removing these so that I can put them easily back on my finger. And let's take a look at this product. So thicker applications of soak-off gel will typically look a little bit more crumbly and flaky when you gently scrape with your cuticle pusher, and you'll start to see the product flake off into chunks. It's not going to be as dramatic as it would be with just gel polish because we're dealing with a lot greater thickness of material. The acetone needs a lot longer to actually break down those bonds, but you can see that I'm able to identify these flaking points in these areas where I am starting to see the material break down. If you're not seeing any amount of crumbling, flaking, anything coming off when you gently scrape with your cuticle pusher, that usually means that the product you're trying to soak off is not actually soak off product. If you're experiencing no movement whatsoever after 7 minutes, especially if you're starting to see severe nail plate pinching or discomfort, skip to my hard gel portion where I'll teach you how to remove those type of materials. Okay, so what I'm going to do is, since I'm able to see that these little pockets are starting to lift, I'm going to do just a little bit more filing because that mechanical removal, that physical removal is going to help the acetone do its job. So rather than file on the same spot where I already have these little holes, I'm going to focus on the other areas that don't seem to be moving as much. Just gentle filing is all you need, so don't put a lot of pressure on the nail. And again, stop and check after every couple passes just to make sure that you're not getting down to the natural nail plate. Usually artificial nail product like this, and I'll show you really quick the color difference so you can see what's natural nail and what isn't, is you can use the color difference even with clear gels. So this clear gel here looks kind of milky, it's more white looking, and as we get closer to our nail bed, you'll start to see kind of more of this pink or reddish or more purpley tone. Just look for that redness, look for kind of that color change. It'll tell you how close you are to the natural nail plate, okay? All right, so some of that flaked off, which is great. And here is a great way for you to see the color difference. Can you see how this is kind of pink in the middle and then it's still milky white out here? That is how you're able to tell if that's product or natural nail plate. So I'm going to check that the wrap is still wet on the inside, still feels nice and moistened. So I can easily just put this right back on my finger, give it a little squeeze. Let's give it another 7 minutes and we'll check again. Okay, so another 7 minutes are up. I'm gonna take off my wrap and let's check this one more time. All right, so just in 14 minutes, you can see I was able to soak off the rest of this artificial nail product. So I'm just using the blade end of my cuticle pusher very gently. I'm not putting any pressure on my natural nail, and that is really important. You can also use the spoon side of your cuticle pusher to just gently go back and forth. I'm not prying anything off. I'm just running this up and down the length of my natural nail to encourage that those flakes just pop right off. If you're getting stuck with your cuticle pusher and you're starting to dig and pry, that is one of the most common ways that you can start to create nail damage. So if things are being stubborn, I want you guys to focus on not trying to pry physically off with any tools or any type of fingernail or anything. I want you to actually just file that specific area a little bit more, very gently, reapply your wrap, and give it another 7 minutes. If you're using primers or any type of adhesion promoters, those are going to make soak off time a little bit longer. There's one little spot right here that's still attached. So I'm just going to take my 100 grit side of my nail file and extremely gently just focus on those areas where I still have a little bit of residual product. Get up close and personal with your filing so that you can really see what area your nail file is making contact, okay? And you can see that little flake coming off right there. If it's really stubborn or it's still thick, just put those wraps back on and let the acetone do the work for you. All right, once you've finished removing this product, you can skip ahead to the final section of this video where I'll explain what your nails should feel like after removal, how to let them recover this week, and what we're doing next in the series. I've listed the timestamp here, or you can click the clickable timestamp down in the video description. Next up, I'm going to go over hard gel removal. Now, you may not know that you have hard gel on your nails, so I'm going to proceed through the beginning of this portion of the tutorial as if I don't know what this is, because a lot of times acrylic nails can look like hard gel can look like full coverage tip extensions, and we sometimes, when we go to a salon or we receive a service, we may not know exactly what product is on our nails, or if you're not sure about what product you purchased and used, same thing can happen where not every nail product can be soaked off with acetone. But the good news is that we can absolutely learn how to remove those more permanent types of products. And I'm going to show you how to do that step by step today. So first things first, you can see that this nail is a lot longer than typical dip powder or overlays or gel polish. And if you have really long nails, I first want to point out that I do not recommend going in and clipping off the length all the way down to your fingertip. The reason why is because, especially if you've been wearing enhancements for a while, your hyponychium, which is the skin that attaches to your nail plate underneath your nail, can extend and grow out a little bit longer to support that length over time. And we can inadvertently cut our hyponychium, which can open us up to infection. Plus, it hurts like the dickens. And if we're going to be applying acetone or alcohol or anything to our nails, we don't want to have open wounds on our skin. So instead of clipping down the length all the way down first, I recommend taking off the color so you can see where your natural nail is before you start addressing the length of the nail. I'm going to be using the Attain emery file, which is an extra wide, extra gritty file. On one side, it has 80 grit. On the other side, it has 100 grit. Grit refers to particles per square inch. So 80 means 80 particles per square inch, and 100 means 100 particles per square inch. The less particles per square inch, the grittier something is going to feel. And usually you can even visually see the difference between the two grits. The lower number means the more gritty it's going to be. The higher the number means the finer it's going to be. So I'm going to be using the 80 grit side of my nail file today. And I wanted to point out how to properly use a nail file efficiently. A lot of people, when they start filing, they will hold the nail file way down and they will just kind of shimmy back and forth on the nail plate surface. But if we do that, we're not actually using the full length of the nail file, which makes nail filing a lot longer of a process. So instead of doing that, I recommend holding your nail file on one end, underhanded, like you're going to toss a frisbee to someone. And that way, when I do one full stroke along my nail, I can use the full length of my nail file. I can even go back and forth, which makes filing that much more efficient and that much faster. You can also hold your nail file kind of like a butter knife if you want to, and you'll see me periodically change my hand position depending on the side of nail that I'm working on and also the different area. One other thing I want to point out is that when you start filing, it's a great idea to really take a look up close as to where you're actually filing on the nail, because angle matters. If we are up too high or we're angling up too much, we can actually be digging into either our nail plate or causing irritation to our skin. So as you get started, start slow, be very intentional about where you're filing. And then once you get that kind of muscle memory down, you'll see that you can go much faster and file much more efficiently. So as soon as I start to see clear peeking through, I will move my nail file around. And also to prevent heat and things like that, you just want to keep your nail file moving. I like to start on the length of my nail first, because then I can be a little bit more cautious as I get closer to my skin. So you'll notice I changed my hand position to kind of that butter knife. And I also like to use my other finger to hold my nail so that it's not wiggling back and forth. So you can also use your other fingers to kind of pull back the skin or just help you get a little bit better access to what you're filing on. All right, once I get that length done, I'm going to thin this out quite a bit because then I can actually shorten this a little bit and then file the rest of the way. So I'm just gonna very carefully go around my cuticle area. As I go around the skin, I'm gonna use more kind of curved motions. And if you feel yourself hitting skin or you're having trouble with hitting the skin too much, you can also apply tape or something around your skin just to kind of protect it as you're doing a bunch of bulk filing. So if your nails are super long, all you really have to do is focus on product removal right in this kind of middle area of the extension. Even if your nails are this long, focus on filing off the color and thinning it out right here where you know your natural nail is going to be. And that way you're going to be able to see it. You can also wet your nail down with water or a little bit of gel cleanser or rubbing alcohol or even just a little bit of acetone. That way you'll be able to see where you are. I'm going to use nail clippers just to show you how you can actually get rid of some of this length. So I'm keeping an eye on, instead of clipping down here and accidentally cutting my hyponychium, I'm going to leave myself about maybe 5 millimeters of space. I'm going to clip one side, being mindful of how close you're getting to that skin underneath if there is hyponychium skin. And now it's going to make your life a lot easier because you're going to be able to shorten this down, round it out, and thin it. Now with hard gel, we can't use acetone to soak this off. So what we're going to do is we're going to file this product more evenly, because you can see I still have quite a hump of product here. It's thinner here. I can also check the thickness of the product by looking at it down this way. And what we want to do is thin this out. If we're going to completely remove hard gel, we need to very gradually thin this product out to the point where we switch from a nail file to a buffer. That's one option. Your other option is to thin this out till it's about credit card thickness, even it out, and then you can absolutely let this hard gel grow out over time. You can eventually backfill it with other product, but the product needs to be thinned out so that you end up with that dexterity that you need with your fingertips, and we're gonna round out the overall shape. But I'm gonna show you how to completely remove hard gel so that you can get right back to your natural nails again, just like I did with these other two fingers. So I'm gonna actually shorten this down with my file the rest of the way. Then I'm going to carefully go across the nail and just focus on trying to thin this out very, very gradually, okay? This is pink builder gel. So you'll notice the color difference between my natural nail plate color and the artificial product. You'll notice this looks really kind of milky, white, pink looking. So that's a great cue to use, is if you start to see things start to look a little bit more pink, red, purpley, it means you're getting closer to the natural nail plate because we're starting to be able to see our nail bed underneath. So just be very mindful of that. You know, do a couple passes in one given area. And I'm going to see if I can file through to my natural nail a little bit so that you guys can see what that looks like. So that is how you know you've broken through the artificial nail product and now you're getting into natural nail. You'll see it kind of flake. You'll see kind of holes start to appear. And depending on where you're filing, you'll start to see that around the edges. You'll start to see it on the free edge. So this lets me know that I need to stop filing in this particular area and I need to avoid that as I continue. Now you can see that I actually have more of my natural nail exposed. So right here in between these two white lines, that is natural nail. So very gently go over a different area. Okay, so you can see that redness I'm talking about. It's just a very different color than the artificial product. So you can see I have a little bit of product here, a little bit of product here, product up in here, but this is all natural nail plate now, and you can see that milkiness is gone. You don't have to get every single little bit of nail product off, especially if it's not lifting. If it's being really stubborn, you can always leave it and just let it grow out. And be mindful of skin irritation too, because even if we're super careful, a lot of times your skin will start to feel really, kind of scratchy, irritated. And so this removal process, you just want to be nice and gentle, especially if you're getting close to your skin. I'm going to use my nail file on the 100 grit side just to kind of round out the corners. It's just a better overall nail shape for trying to rehabilitate damage or, kind of getting back into the groove with natural nails. Okay. So I'm going to switch to my sponge buffer. This is a 180 grit sponge buffer. And now what I can do is just simply go over the surface and refine any areas where there's still a little bit of lingering product and just smooth and even that out. So that is how much product I would actually remove. You don't want to go too far. And even if there's some lingering areas where you still feel like you have a little bit of product, it's better to be cautious and just leave it there than to try and get every single little stitch of product off. All right, once you've finished removing this product, you can skip ahead to the final section of this video where I'll explain what your nails should feel like after removal, how to let them recover this week, and what we're doing next in the series. I've listed the timestamp here, or you can click the clickable timestamp down in the video description. Next up on the removal train is dip powder, and I'm going to be showing you guys how to remove any type of glue-based nail product like a dip powder system. So let's get into how we're going to address dip powder nails. All right, both of these nails actually have dip powder, but they differ in a couple ways. This nail is a complete dip powder nail with layers of glue, and this nail is a clear dip powder nail with gel polish on top. So I wanted to show both of these at the same time to just kind of give you two different examples of nail products I have seen people use periodically and show you exactly how to remove both of these types of surfaces. Today, I'm going to be using the Attain emery file. This is an extra wide nail file, which is great for removal. It also features 80 and 100 grit. 80 is the super gritty side, 100 is the finer side, and grit refers to the amount of particles per square inch. So if you're curious about which number means what, the less particles per square inch, the more gritty something is going to feel, the more textured it's going to be. The higher the number, the more particles per square inch and the smoother it's going to feel. When it comes to nail filing, I recommend using the full length of your nail file to really speed up your filing process and make it more efficient. So rather than holding my nail file way down here and just using the little edge of it, I'm actually going to hold my nail file on the end, underhanded as if I'm going to toss someone a frisbee, and I'm going to use the full length of my nail file so that I use the maximum real estate I have on this grit. And that is going to speed up my filing because it's going to give me that much more abrasive filing power per stroke. If you're not accustomed to filing your own nails, one of the things I recommend for beginners is to stop and take a look at how angle can really impact where you're filing. So we want to actually focus on the nail product. We don't want to be digging into the natural nail or the skin. And we want to use, again, the maximum amount of real estate. So since we're filing on a curved surface with a flat material, we need to kind of take into consideration the angle at which we are filing. So after every pass, you can take a look at where your nail file made contact, and then you can try a different approach and a different angle to practice actually filing different areas of your nail. As I mentioned in the beginning of this video, we want to focus on filing more and soaking less. So with dip powder, we definitely want to break through those upper layers, especially if you have dip powder with gel top coat on top. So once we see clear peeking through, I want to actually stop what I'm doing and move on to a different area. I like to focus on the free edge, which is this part of your nail plate, the nail tip, because that's usually where the removal can be a little bit more stubborn. And you really just want to make this look like Swiss cheese, where you've got kind of holes peeking through all of those layers. Same thing on this nail. This one has gel color on top. So I'm going to file until I can see a little bit of clear peeking through. That way I'm going to be able to get that acetone down into those acrylic powder and glue layers. And again, focusing on the free edge because that is usually where it is going to be most stubborn for removal. Don't forget to do the kind of dominant side. This is usually the harder side to file because it's closest to your dominant hand, but you want to make sure that you also get down in there and remove product to break through. Okay, so once your nails look kind of like Swiss cheese, you're ready to introduce acetone. I'm going to be using our Attain removal wraps, but you can also easily use aluminum foil, tin foil cut into kind of strips about this size with a cotton ball cut in half or any type of cotton cosmetic pad and place it inside of the foil. I'm going to be using that same acetone that I bought at the grocery store just to make this super realistic. I'm not using any special professional removers or anything. And I'm just going to give this a couple dips into the acetone. You want the pad to be really well moistened. without it being soaking, dripping wet, just to prevent it from running all the way down your fingers and your hand and getting all over the place. And so just make sure it's nice and saturated without it being super soaked and drippy. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to place the actual tip of my nail, that free edge. I want to make sure it's actually touching that cotton pad. If I put my nail down here, I'm not going to get any acetone exposure on the end of my nail, and it's going to make removal in that area really difficult. So move your finger up a little bit. Okay, so once I have my finger lined up, I'm going to make a little taco first, where my finger is sandwiched in between, nice and centered on that cotton pad. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to fold one end of this underneath my finger, okay? And then I'm going to fold the other side over that, okay? And it's okay if it doesn't turn out like a perfect burrito. Give it a nice squeeze to secure it onto your finger, and then you can always tuck any foil like this underneath. A gentle squeeze is going to do a great job of sealing this. Doesn't have to be super tight, but we do want to prevent evaporation of that acetone. And it's also going to help keep heat in on our fingers, which also helps acetone do its job better. And if you find it easier to do it upside down, you can also do this. So sometimes I find it if I'm, having a hard time holding onto the foil, I'll actually put it with my finger upside down, make sure I have that cotton covering the tip of my fingernail, fold it this way, one side over, and then the other side over that and all the way around, and then give it a nice gentle squeeze, okay? And as soon as you're done applying all of your nail wraps, make sure you put the cap back on your acetone to also prevent evaporation, and also make sure that you don't accidentally spill it while you're working. Now, we're gonna wait an initial 7-minute period, because 7 minutes after years of using nail products is the perfect amount of time to have an initial checkpoint where we can identify, is stuff coming off? Did we file enough product before we put acetone on? And if you inadvertently have hard gel on your nail, it's gonna tell you that right up front so that you don't waste time trying to soak off the product or having your nails start to pinch or throb. So 7 minutes is the initial time we're going to wait before we check these nails. And during colder months, or if you're like me and you have cold hands, I recommend a couple things to help speed up this process. Some people find it helpful to wrap their hands in a plastic bag. You can use something as simple as a grocery bag or a Ziploc or anything like that. And what I like to do is put my hand inside of the bag. I'll gently wrap it around my wrists, and then you can tuck it in. This is gonna help keep the acetone from evaporating prematurely. It'll keep the warmth of your hand inside the bag, which also helps speed up the time. But during colder months, like during the winter, you can also apply a heating pad on top of your hands, a warm towel, or even something as simple as just sitting on your hands to speed up the removal time through body heat. Okay, it's been 7 minutes of initial time, so I'm gonna take off this plastic bag and let's do our initial check of these nails. So I like to carefully take the wraps off just by pulling them off my finger. That way, if I need to put them back on, I can simply just slip them right back onto my finger without having to undo it. So just pull these off and put them aside. Oh, and you can see this one is starting to really flake off. So I actually love when this happens during removal, where you can physically see the little flakes start to peel up and crumble. And you'll notice that depending on the amount of glue that was used or what the layers are like, glue-based systems tend to be a little bit different the way they come off. They're going to be kind of sticky and crumbly. So I'm going to show you guys 2 different scenarios. That way you guys can see it in 2 different ways. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my cuticle pusher. I'm going to make sure I keep a nice parallel angle, right? So I'm not digging into my nail like this. I'm just going to kind of use the edge of my cuticle pusher and just gently scrape back and forth. That way I'm not going to accidentally dig into my natural nail plate. So just scrape back and forth like this, nice and gently. You can flake off any of that dip powder that comes off. Okay, so then this one, again, I'm just going to gently scrape back and forth. I'm not using hardly any pressure. I'm just letting the tool do the work, and anything that's willing to come off will come off. Anything that's not willing to come off will not come off. And if you have any stubborn areas, we'll just go back for a little bit more soak off time. It's only been 7 minutes, which is great. If you're experiencing no movement whatsoever after 7 minutes, especially if you're starting to see severe nail plate pinching or discomfort, skip to my hard gel portion where I'll teach you how to remove those type of materials. Okay, perfect. So now what I want to do is I'm going to file just a little bit more in the stubborn areas. You can see like right here, you can see the pinky tone of my nail bed poking through, but over on this side, it's more milky white. It's still got a lot of product right there. And then this one, you can see most of it came off and exposed my natural nail plate, but I've got a little bit more on the free edge and a little bit right here in the center. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to take my same nail file. I'm going to file a little bit more just in this particular area on the product only. And this is the part that you really need to be hyper aware of, is really focus on only filing on the part that is product. And color is your best friend. The visual cue for what's natural nail and what's product is honestly this kind of milky tone. When you file product, or even when you start to soak it off, it'll have this kind of chalky white look to it. And as you get closer to nail plate, you'll start to see little pink, reddish, or purplish areas start to come through. And that is your way to see what is artificial nail product and what is nail plate. And then I'm going to put these wraps back on. So I have them organized here. I like to check the inside with my finger just to make sure it's still nice and moistened in there with acetone. If you need to unwrap these and put acetone in them again because they've dried out, that's totally fine. Just gently unwrap the foil as you did, and then you can re-moisten the wrap and put the wrap back on. So I'm going to do my ring finger first, making sure I cover that free edge. One side first, then the other all the way around my finger. Give it a nice little gentle squeeze. And then this one, I'll show you, it's got like a little flake of gel in there. You can leave that in. It's not going to damage anything, or sometimes you can just toss it out. And that looks good. It still feels wet on the inside. So I'm just going to slide this right back onto my finger, and I don't even have to reapply it. I'll just give it one more gentle squeeze. So we're going to wait another 7 minutes. 7-minute chunks is the best amount of time to give in between checks. It's going to prevent you from getting too far down the road with removal where maybe things aren't going well. Maybe you should have removed a little bit more product. And it's also going to prevent you from getting to that point where your nails are starting to pinch, or they're starting to throb, or they're not feeling well. So 7 minutes is a great number to use as you go through this removal process. So let's wait another 7 minutes and then we'll come back and check. Okay, so it's been another 7 minutes. So let's take a quick look at these nails and see how we're coming along. Okay, so things are looking pretty good. Now, with glue-based systems, you'll often see kind of this residue that gets left on the nail, even when the actual like acrylic powder and everything has been dissolved off. And that's totally fine. We can actually address this residue with just a light buffing. So last but not least, what I recommend is gently to push back that stretched proximal nail fold. I'll teach you guys more about this when we get into nail anatomy and manicuring techniques. But for now, we're just going to very, very gently push back the skin. I'm going to utilize my Attain buffer, which is a nice smooth buffer. And I'm going to very lightly buff the surface of my nail plate. Buffers actually smooth the nail plate more than nail files do. Okay, so once we have the product smoothed out, our natural nail plates are feeling it nice again. If you want to remove any length or also round out any corners, especially if your nails are quite flimsy or thin towards this free edge, you can clip off any damaged length and just get them back to nice and short and round again. And let's reintroduce some moisture to these nails. One of my favorite hydration products is Attain Hydration, and we have two different scents. We have green tea ginger or unscented. Think of this like a skin milk. And if you're interested in seeing all the details about Attain Hydration, I'll put the link to this video right here so you guys can check that out. But I love this because it's a non-greasy formula. It'll really saturate your skin well. It'll make your nail plates feel really nice again. It smells like heaven. I love the green tea ginger scent. And it's just such a great way to reintroduce moisture without having all of that oil all over your hands so you can get back to your day. One thing I wanted to point out is that I like to reintroduce moisture even before I wash my hands, and then oftentimes I will reintroduce moisture again. That way I can see what truly, if I have a hangnail or something, I can see truly what needs to maybe be nipped. But I find that people often get really aggressive with manicuring, with nipping off skin before they even take a look at how well even just a little bit of moisture can make their skin look. So I'm going to show you guys what happens when we reintroduce moisture right away. So I like to rub this in. I spray it liberally on my hands. It does mist if you want to just like a light mist, but honestly what I can do is rub this all in as if it's lotion. It feels very nice and liquidy and creamy, but not greasy. And then I just give this a few seconds to soak into my skin, and it really feels nice. Once it dries, it's like you have your hands again. There's no greasiness. You can touch your phone. You can do all kinds of things. And it's just a lot more forgiving, especially during the day, than a bunch of oil. But you can also use any of your favorite emollients, cuticle oils, body oils, anything to really give these nails the moisture that they deserve. So this is what your natural nails should look like after removal. You'll notice that we don't have any gouges or missing layers of material. And that softness that you might feel in your nail is actually quite normal. A lot of us forget how flimsy natural nails really are. And as your nails rebalance over the next several days, they will firm up, even if they are damaged. Now, I want to point out one thing that happens usually with solvent-based systems, and that is white spots. If you notice white spots after removal, it usually means that the product you were wearing was solvent-based, and solvents can include things like glues that we use with nail dip systems. So what happens over time is those solvents continue to shrink and tug at the nail plate, and it creates kind of this micro pitting or delamination where we'll have little patchy white spots. Usually over the next couple days, your nails, especially if you're continuing to hydrate them, will recuperate and go back to one uniform color. But just keep in mind that if you've been wearing solvent-based products, even gels sometimes contain a lot of solvents. They can be quite drying to the nail plate, and they continue to shrink and tug on the nail plate the longer we wear them. So you might have some of these little white spots that are indications of that. It's not really a sign of bad nail health. It's just something that happens with those. And those are typical of products that are not meant to be worn for more than probably 2 weeks at a time. As we wrap up this episode, I want to be very clear about something important that I mentioned at the beginning. Gel products themselves truly do not damage nails. What causes thinning and weakness over time is that excess prep, the aggressive removal, and constant reapplication that's physically removing those layers of the nail plate. We only have so many to begin with. We can also traumatize nails by wearing them too long for our lifestyle, or also using them as tools. I see you using your nail for opening pop cans, okay? That's why the timing of this series matters. If you've just removed product, I want you to try and let your nails be natural. Keep them short, rounded, and keep them well moisturized. In the next episode, we'll do a full nail health assessment so you can understand what condition your nails are actually in before we think about applying any additional product. So I really want to encourage you to take advantage of this opportunity to use the timing of this series to allow your nails to rest and recuperate. Healthy nails actually support artificial nail product way better than damaged ones do. So think about that as we progress through this series. The good news is the removal, if you've decided to do that today, is done. Now you know how to do it properly while minimizing damage to your nail plates. The healing is already happening, and I want to encourage you to take advantage of this healing time. And next week, we assess.